Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
It is. Today, we're diving into something that I think low-key impacts like every single romantic relationship.
Yeah?
Expectations.
Right. Yeah.
All those like hopes and dreams and assumptions that we kind of bring to the table, sometimes without even realizing it.
Right.
Well, we've been digging into this super popular relationship podcast
Mm-hmm.
that's all about managing those tricky expectations.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So get ready for some serious aha moments.
I'm ready.
So one of the things that really jumped out at me from this podcast
Yeah.
was just how often those unspoken expectations can really trip us up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, we just assume our partner should get us.
Right.
Like, they have this, like, built-in intuition for our needs and wants.
It's like that whole mind reader myth, right?
Exactly.
Hilarious in theory, disastrous in reality.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But the podcast makes this really great point.
Okay.
It's not about blaming our partners for not being psychic. It's more about like understanding why we even have those expectations in the first place.
Yeah.
So where do these pesky expectations come from?
Well, they dug into this idea that our expectations are really shaped by all sorts of things.
Oh, interesting.
Family dynamics,
Okay.
past relationships,
Uh-huh.
even just societal norms.
Okay.
Like maybe you grew up in a family
Yeah.
where grand gestures were like the norm.
Oh, yeah.
So you just naturally expect that from a partner.
Makes sense.
Or maybe a past relationship left you feeling neglected.
Mm-hmm.
So now you crave constant reassurance.
Oh, yeah. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's like we're carrying these invisible blueprints from our past
Oh,
into our present relationships.
exactly.
I like that. Invisible blueprints.
And the podcast really emphasized that becoming aware of those blueprints,
Okay.
that is a game changer.
Okay.
Because once you understand where those expectations are coming from,
Yeah.
you can start to question them.
Ooh.
Like, are they really serving you in the relationship? Or are they just these echoes from the past?
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
So, like, how do we start to kind of unpack those expectations
Right.
and have those conversations with our partner?
Right. The podcast has some really practical advice on this.
Okay.
The first step is simple but powerful.
Okay.
Just name it.
Okay.
Instead of getting frustrated when your partner doesn't meet an unspoken expectation,
Yeah.
try expressing it as a need.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of fuming that they didn't plan a big birthday surprise,
Oh, yeah.
you could say, it would really mean a lot to me if we celebrated my birthday in a special way.
Okay. So much better.
Yeah,
So much less accusatory.
Yeah.
Right.
absolutely.
And it's more about like creating that shared understanding.
Right. It's about expressing your vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
and inviting your partner into that conversation.
I love that. So, listener, think about where your expectations tend to show up in your relationships.
Yeah.
What are those things that you just assume your partner should know?
Yeah. And once you've identified some of those expectations,
Yeah.
the podcast suggests being proactive.
Oh, okay.
Don't wait for resentment to build up
Oh, that's good advice.
before you address them. It's so much easier to have these conversations early on,
Right.
even if it feels a little awkward at first.
Oh, gosh. Early communication. That's something I wish I had learned years ago.
Me too.
It would have saved a lot of unnecessary drama. But it's never too late to start, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And they emphasized that these conversations
Yeah.
are an ongoing process,
Oh.
not a one-time fix,
Mhm.
because as our lives change,
Yeah.
so do our needs and expectations.
So true. What might have worked for you 5 years ago
Mhm.
might not be a good fit today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the podcast really dives into the nitty-gritty
Okay.
of how to navigate these different expectations without driving each other crazy.
Okay.
And they broke it down into some common categories.
Oh, I love a good breakdown. Hit me with those categories.
Well, first up is romance and affection. We all have different ideas about what feels loving, right?
Yes, for sure.
Like, for some people, it's all about grand gestures,
Mhm.
while others feel most loved through just everyday acts of kindness.
Oh, yeah. I can see how that could cause some friction if those expectations aren't aligned.
Totally.
Like one person's waiting for a dozen roses.
Right.
And the other's like, I clean the gutters. That's love.
Exactly. And without that clear communication,
Yeah.
one person feels unappreciated,
Uh-huh.
while the other has no clue that they're missing the mark.
This is already making me rethink some of my own assumptions.
Oh, good.
Okay, what other categories?
Another big one is time together.
Oh, yeah.
Some people crave a lot of quality time with their partner,
Okay.
while others really prioritize their independence and alone time. Those needs aren't always compatible.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic relationship dilemma.
Yeah.
I've definitely been on both sides of that equation.
Yeah.
So, how do you find that balance without one person feeling smothered and the other feeling neglected?
Well, the podcast had some brilliant insights on that,
Okay.
but I think we should save that juicy discussion for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. You're killing me with suspense.
I know.
But you're right, we need to pace ourselves. Listeners, stick with us, because in the next part, we're going even deeper into those specific categories
Yes.
and how to navigate those tricky expectation clashes with your partner.
We won't want to miss it.
You won't want to miss it. Okay, so welcome back.
Yes.
Before the break, we were just getting to like the really good stuff,
Yes.
how to actually navigate those tricky expectation clashes when
Right.
it comes to like romance time together,
Right.
all those other like relationship hotspots.
Yes. And the podcast we're deep diving into
Okay.
offered some seriously insightful strategies.
Okay.
They emphasized that it's not about one person winning
Yeah.
or forcing the other to conform to their expectations.
Right.
It's about finding those creative solutions
Yeah.
where both partners feel understood and respected.
I love that. So it's less about digging in our heels and more about getting curious about our partner's perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember those categories we were talking about?
Yes.
Romance and affection was the first one.
Right.
The podcast gave this really relatable example of a couple
Okay.
who kept clashing over this.
Oh,
The woman was all about those grand gestures,
no.
surprise dates, flowers, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
But her partner was more of like an acts of service kind of guy.
Okay.
He showed love by fixing things around the house, running errands, that sort of thing.
I can see how that would lead to some like misunderstandings.
Oh, totally.
She's waiting for the romantic getaway
Right.
and he's cleaning the gutters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they both ended up feeling unappreciated
Oh.
because they weren't speaking each other's love languages.
Yeah.
So the podcast suggested that instead of trying to change each other,
Right.
they could try to meet in the middle.
Okay.
Maybe he could make an effort to plan a special date night once a month,
I
and she could acknowledge and appreciate his everyday acts of service.
love that.
Yeah,
That's a great example of how compromise doesn't have to mean sacrificing what's important to you.
exactly.
It's about finding that win-win where both people feel loved and valued.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to the next category,
Okay.
time together.
Oh, yeah.
The podcast highlighted how different attachment styles can play a big role here.
Attachment styles. That's something we hear about a lot, but don't always understand how it impacts our relationships.
Right.
Can you give us like a quick refresher?
Absolutely. Attachment styles basically refer to the way we relate to others in close relationships.
Okay.
And they're often shaped by our early childhood experiences.
Okay.
So someone with a secure attachment style generally feels comfortable with both intimacy and independence.
Okay.
But someone with an anxious attachment style might crave more reassurance and closeness,
Mm-hmm.
while someone with an avoidant attachment style
Yeah.
might need more space and autonomy.
Okay. That's super helpful.
Yes.
So how does this play out when it comes to like expectations around time together?
Well, imagine a couple where one person has an anxious attachment style
Okay.
and the other has an avoidant attachment style.
No.
The person with the anxious attachment might want to spend every free moment together,
Yeah.
while the person with the avoidant attachment might feel suffocated by that much togetherness.
Right.
And without understanding those underlying attachment needs,
Yeah.
they're likely to just butt heads and feel frustrated.
So it's not really about the amount of time itself.
Right.
It's about those deeper emotional needs driving those expectations.
You got it.
Okay.
And the podcast gives some really practical tips
Okay.
for navigating those differences.
Okay.
For example, the couple in this scenario
Yeah.
could try to find a balance that honors both their needs.
Okay.
Maybe they designate certain nights for quality time together,
Okay.
while also respecting each other's need for solo activities or time with friends.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being intentional
Yes.
and creating a structure that works for both people.
Exactly. And communication is key here, as always.
Yes.
The person with the anxious attachment style could learn to express their need for connection
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't feel demanding or clingy,
Right.
while the person with the avoidant attachment style could work on communicating their need for space.
Right.
in a way that doesn't feel rejecting or dismissive.
That's such a nuanced approach.
Yeah.
It really highlights how understanding those deeper dynamics can transform those expectation clashes
Right.
into opportunities for growth and deeper connection.
Absolutely.
Okay, what other categories did the podcast explore?
Well, they also delved into the tricky terrain of communication and conflict resolution,
Oh, yeah.
which is a huge area
Right.
where expectations can differ wildly.
That's a big one. Some people are all about hashing things out immediately,
Right.
while others need time to process before even engaging in a difficult conversation. So how did the podcast suggest navigating those differences?
They share this really powerful analogy of a thermostat for conflict.
A thermostat. Okay.
Imagine each person in the relationship has their own internal thermostat
Yeah.
that gets triggered when conflict arises.
Okay.
Some people have a really sensitive thermostat
Okay.
that goes off quickly,
Yeah.
while others have a thermostat that takes longer to heat up.
I love that analogy. So it's not about judging someone for being too sensitive or too cold.
Right.
It's about understanding their unique way of responding to conflict.
Exactly.
So how does this thermostat idea actually help couples, in real life?
Well, the podcast suggested that couples could use this analogy
Okay.
to create a conflict plan.
A conflict plan.
Yeah, they could talk about how each of them tends to react in heated moments
Okay.
and what they need from their partner in order to feel safe and supported.
Okay.
Maybe one person needs a time out to cool down before engaging,
Mm-hmm.
while the other needs reassurance and physical touch.
So it's about having those conversations before conflict erupts?
Exactly.
So you're not just reacting in the heat of the moment.
Right, and the podcast really emphasized that these conflict plans aren't set in stone.
Yeah.
They can evolve as you learn more about each other
Okay.
and as your relationship grows and changes.
So this is already giving me so much to think about in my own relationships.
Oh, good.
Listener, are you feeling the same way?
Yeah.
What's resonating with you most so far?
Yeah, are there any light bulbs going off
Yeah.
as we unpack these different categories of expectations?
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's one more crucial aspect of managing expectations
Yep.
that the podcast highlighted.
Oh,
And it's something we don't always consider.
okay.
What is this missing piece of the puzzle?
Well, they talked about the importance of being mindful of our own energy and capacity.
Oh, okay.
We're not always going to be able to meet our partner's needs perfectly,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about being honest with ourselves and with each other
Mhm.
about where we're at.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
We often feel like we need to show up perfectly all the time,
Yes.
but that's just not realistic.
Right? And the podcast emphasized that trying to force ourselves to meet an expectation
Yeah.
when we're already depleted
Yeah.
is a recipe for resentment and burnout.
Oh, for sure.
It's much healthier to communicate our limits
Right.
and ask for support when we need it.
So if I'm feeling overwhelmed
Yeah.
and my partner is expecting me to plan an elaborate date night,
Right.
it's better to just be honest and say, hey, I'm running on fumes right now. Can we maybe do something low-key this week?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the same goes for our partners.
Right.
If they're going through a stressful time or dealing with other challenges,
Yeah.
their capacity to meet certain expectations might be lower than usual.
Yeah.
Having that awareness and understanding
Yeah.
can prevent a lot of unnecessary conflict and disappointment.
It's like giving each other permission to be human, right? With all of our imperfections and limitations, those
Absolutely.
feel so liberating.
It is, and that brings us to another really interesting point that the podcast raised.
Okay.
They talked about how expectations are often intertwined with our personal values.
Ooh, this is getting deep.
Yeah.
I'm sensing another aha moment coming on.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Okay.
Okay, so we were just starting to unpack this idea of how our personal values tie into our expectations in relationships.
Right, and it's fascinating how often we have these expectations without even realizing they're rooted in our core values.
So give us an example. How do values actually play out in the dynamics of a relationship?
Well, let's say one person highly values spontaneity and adventure,
Okay.
while their partner values stability and routine.
Yeah.
This could lead to clashes if the spontaneous one is always planning last-minute trips,
Right.
and the routine-oriented one feels stressed and unprepared.
Oh, I've totally been there. You're speaking my language. I'm all about planning, and my partner thrives on spontaneity. It definitely creates some interesting challenges.
And the podcast emphasized that it's not about one person's values being right or wrong. It's about recognizing and respecting those differences,
Okay.
and then finding ways to honor both sets of values.
So in the example you just gave, how could that couple find that balance?
Well, maybe they could agree to plan one spontaneous adventure each month while also scheduling in some cozy nights at home for the routine-oriented partner.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot where both people feel like their values are being acknowledged.
That's such a great illustration of how understanding those deeper layers of ourselves and our partners can lead to more fulfilling relationships.
Exactly. And the podcast also highlighted how our values can evolve over time
Oh, right.
as we grow and change.
Yeah.
So it's important to keep checking in with ourselves and with each other to make sure our expectations are still aligned.
It's like that ongoing conversation we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
It's not a one-time fix.
Right.
It's about staying curious and adaptable throughout the journey of the relationship.
You nailed it. And that brings us to one final point from the podcast that I found really powerful.
Okay.
They talked about the importance of letting go of the ideal relationship.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Tell me more.
Well, they challenged this idea that there's this perfect blueprint for a relationship,
Okay.
and that if we just find the right person and do all the right things, everything will magically fall into place.
Yeah, I think a lot of us get caught up in that fairy tale narrative.
Yes.
It sets us up for disappointment because no relationship is perfect.
Right. And the podcast emphasized that embracing the imperfections and challenges is actually where the real growth and intimacy happen.
Okay.
It's about learning to navigate those inevitable bumps in the road together.
It's about shifting from that happily ever after mentality to a growing and evolving together mindset.
Exactly. And that requires a willingness to let go of our rigid expectations and be open to the unexpected twists and turns that life throws our way.
Wow. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
I agree.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on managing expectations in relationships. It's not about demanding that our partner fit into some preconceived mold.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves and each other on a deeper level.
Yes.
And creating a space for both people to thrive.
You captured it perfectly. And remember, listener, it all starts with that self-awareness.
Yeah.
Take some time to reflect on your own expectations and where they're coming from.
Okay.
And then have those open and honest conversations with your partner. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but the rewards in terms of deeper connection and intimacy are well worth the effort.
So true. Well, listener, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From identifying those hidden expectations to communicating them effectively and finding creative compromises. We've even explored the role of attachment styles, personal values, and the importance of letting go of the ideal relationship.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and tools to navigate this complex but incredibly rewarding aspect of your own relationships.
And remember, the journey of managing expectations is an ongoing one. It's a process of continual learning, growth, and communication. But the rewards in terms of a deeper, more fulfilling partnership are well worth the effort.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of expectations in romantic relationships.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.